What's up, Diablo 4 players? So, we got the brand new Tyreals buff in the game right now, which basically doubled its stats, and on top of that, we got Whirlwind actually getting an insane buff as well. So, for starters, I want to go ahead and go over the updates, which I basically just mentioned. But yeah, Tyreals Divine Barrage that it's shooting out, this is not Holy Bolts, it is the Tyreals Might's special power activating here. And on top of that, the Dust Devil's aspect, Whirlwind got increased. So what are we going to be doing with all of this bonus damage? Well, we're going to be utilizing the aspect of Berserk Ripping, making a damage over time build, but it doesn't really feel like a damage over time build, as you'll see us just basically mow through the content. For reference here, this is just a 100. You can go way higher with the build, but even earlier on, with just the gear that I'm about to mention, you will be able to clear stuff very, very fast. So let's go ahead and go over the build as well as some of the newer changes and updates to this brand new build, as we didn't really have too much access to it before because, well, the numbers weren't there. So for starters, let's go ahead and go over the skills. We'll go over then the gear, the skill tree, as well as the Paragon Board. Now there is one note that I do want to go ahead and mention. One of the glyphs doesn't seem to be working properly as of right now, so I'll give you guys a suggestion until this bug gets fixed. But I'm still playing right now with the bug that actually makes us deal less damage, but it's fine. You're just going to be able to complete content with no problem with this build, even with the bug of one of the glyphs kind of not working properly. So for starters, one thing that you will need to actually take into consideration is cooldown reduction for this build to feel really good, because without berserking, the build won't really feel like it does any damage, because it relies off of Berserk Ripping, giving us this legendary aspect power where whenever we deal damage while we are berserking, we get 8% of that to activate as bleed damage, and we're going to be scaling a bunch of crit to actually have this apply to go even further with one of the passives on the very bottom of the tree. But for starters, as far as the skills go, we activate Wrath of Berserker, then we want to make sure that we activate our shouts after. And the reason why is we run Martial, which reduces the cooldown of other things. And ideally, what you want to try to do with all of your shouts, you can pretty much keep most of them up majority of the time, and you want to make sure you are using your shouts in bigger packs, because there's something called the Bold Chieftain's aspect, which gives you additional cooldown reduction, and your damage is definitely going to be tied to your war cry, which will actually allow you to actually get berserking, because without berserking you won't be able to really deal damage. It's part of the build that's very important to mention. And then you use Whirlwind not to actually deal the damage, but to generate these tornadoes that will then actually deal the damage. And then you have Iron Skin to give yourself immunity to any sort of negative effects, because you will be able to get unstoppable when you actually have Iron Skin, as well as gaining damage reduction. Also keeping that shield up, so our Tyreals Might, the uber unique armor, will be able to shoot out these divine barrages when we're at full HP. So another thing I want to mention, in the gameplay, how we are playing is we are tapping our button. So if you want to use keyboard, that's fine too. Just tap on the button versus holding it down. If you hold it down, you will deal less damage. And the way it works until they give Whirlwind the update in Season 5 is that it doesn't scale with your attack speed, where it may change later down the line and it might shoot faster depending on your attack speed. But as of right now, the best thing to do is to rapidly spam whatever button that you have bound to your Whirlwind. So do that and you'll get a lot more of these divine barrages, and the tornadoes will start coming out a lot more frequently. But if you want a smooth playstyle, you can hold it down. I mean, this is only 100. You can go way higher with this build. I believe it's cleared over 130s at the moment. So again, this can be a very viable push build. So now that we got that out of the way, let's go over the technique. This is pretty simple. Two-handed axe. Why do you use two-handed axe? Well, with this build, you're going to be relying on crit, even though it's a damage over time build. I know it sounds weird, but it'll make sense later. So for starters, as far as our gear, we want to run Harlequin Crest. We also want to run Tyreals Might. We also want Ring of the Stars Skies and the Grandfather. These are all the mythic uniques, aka the uber uniques. If you don't have them, can you play the build? I've got some suggestions also in the notes. If you don't happen to have those, you can play other things. But what I mentioned is, you know, to be honest, I would really suggest you guys to play a Bash Barbarian build if you don't happen to have these, because it's kind of like if you're cooking up a pizza. If you don't have tomato sauce, you can put ketchup, but it's not going to taste as good, right? Just like with this build, if you don't have Tyreals Might, you don't have Ring of the Stars Skies, you don't have Grandfather, it's not going to feel as good. So my recommendation is to run a Bash Barbarian, which is super beginner friendly, super fast. I'll link that also down below. But those are the 4 uber uniques that will be required to get this build up and running to make it feel very smooth. So as far as our helm, yeah, like I said, Harlequin Crest. Ideally, cooldown reduction is a really good stat to have, but you can get those other things if you want to get like any resistance, max life, cooldown reduction. I still provide the stuff for you guys in case you want to play it anyways, and you don't happen to have the correct things. That's fine. But Tyreals Might for the armor. You can again get another chest piece with any sort of like defensive stats. That's fine as well. And then for the gloves, I opted to go for Edge Masters over Elements. Elements could be fine too. It technically gives you more damage, but at a 50% uptime. I'd rather just have the 20% potential. It's more like 19% extra bonus damage because you're going to have to spend your Fury to actually activate it. So you'll be like pretty much at the full benefit. I mean, if you guys watch my theory, in the very beginning I'll have to shout, but after I do my shouts, I'm at maximum resource. It doesn't become a problem at all. Resource is not a problem, so you run this and it's just going to be a smooth experience. We also run the aspect of the Iron Warrior, so we get unstoppable, and then a Relentless Berserker's aspect. You remember how I mentioned we're going to be dealing damage through berserking, so we need to extend that duration. And then also the aspect of berserk ripping. This is tied to how we actually deal our damage. It is basically with our tornadoes, so don't worry about really trying to hit them with the whirlwind. The tornadoes are more important, but if you're just right on top of them, the whirlwinds kind of spawn out anyways. And then we're also running the Devilish aspect over here, so after we generate Fury, it's going to be able to create these Dust Devils that do damage. And then this is the thing that got buffed, so we're going to be putting this on our amulet for the extra bonus. Starless Skies is going to give us more damage with all of like the Tyreals, little like bolts that shoot out, but it also gives us resource cost reduction, which generally does help out. If you don't happen to have this, obviously a ring with any sort of resource cost reduction, that's fine as well. And then also you want to try to get, ideally, that Warcry cooldown reduction on your other ring. So crit strike chance, crit damage, those are all great stats. Vulnerable damage is even great. Ideally, what you want to try to get is that lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable. That is very good. If you don't have it, drop Edge Masters and run a Cursed Touch. You need to add vulnerability to every Diablo build. And then, obviously, Grandfather is great. And then we have the aspect of the Fierce Wind, so our shouts are also going to be creating these Dust Devils that shoot out. And then other important things to kind of take into consideration for your gear as far as things that you want to actually roll on your gear. So like I mentioned before, crit strike chance, crit damage, vulnerable damage, strength, max life, these are all great. You may need to get armor as one of the stats depending on if it rolls greater affix or not. You may also need to temper on to get armor. But now with the newer changes on the Paragon board, you should be able to reach pretty much everything on the Paragon board for free. All of the yellow nodes like super far that used to require like 600 plus, they've reduced all of those. And because you run the Grandfather and because that thing actually has all stats, it's very easy with Harlequin as well as Grandfather to reach every single like node. I'm talking like 7 Paragon boards, you're going to be fine, which is crazy. But just the general stuff, strength, vulnerable damage, crit, like, it doesn't really matter too much. People ask, is like vulnerable damage or crit damage better? Crit damage technically gets kind of like a double benefit because like you get the extra bonuses on your skill tree, but there is another thing on the Paragon board, which the more vulnerable damage you get, the better that gets. But that's getting changed in Season 5 because there's a cap. So honestly, if you want to kind of prep for that and you want to run this build maybe by the time Season 5 is out, because this build is still going to be like dominating, you can consider getting more crit versus more vulnerable because there's a cap on it. Until you reach that cap, well, then you can make that decision for yourself. But there's nothing really other then again getting the generic crit strike chance, crit damage. Those are the two stats that you want to try to go for. Like core damage or ranks to Whirlwind doesn't do anything. You don't deal damage with Whirlwind. It's the tornadoes that deal all the damage. And then for the gems, you want to run sapphires, rubies, and then in your jewelry, you can run any sort of resistance that you need. One thing with this build that is kind of nice is that you can just get maybe 1 or 2 pieces of gear. If you happen to have one thing that has like a good roll on the all resistance and then you masterwork it, you're pretty much good to go because Starless Skies gives you double to all res. I know it says something over here, this hasn't updated it, but also with Tyreals Might you also get all resistances, so depending on that you can actually get a lot of resistances pretty easy and you don't have to hit every single one, allowing you to basically throw in diamond, and then it makes things a lot easier to maximize your resistances because Tyreals also has a special ability where you also get the maximum resistance to all elements, which is super helpful. And then as far as the skill tree, check out the notes if you happen to not have certain things. I put some other notes out there. And then also into the skill tree now that we went over the gear. So as far as the skill tree goes, the first 2 points don't matter. And then you want to make sure you get the Furious Whirlwind. Remember, Whirlwind doesn't deal damage, but you want to apply the bleed to other targets. And then another thing that is very good is pressure points. So this is a chance to make enemies vulnerable. And, well, you know, your Whirlwind does help out with that. So it's a way to get consistent vulnerability. And then Martial Vigor, Imposing Presence. If you can get ranks to these when you go ahead and do the Tempering, these are great as well. And then with Iron Skin, I really like this one that heals us, because the more HP we have, it's going to be better for us, because what that allows us to do is shoot out those bolts with the Tyreals armor. And then you can run Challenging Shell and Enhanced Challenging Shell, and then we have the Tactical, so we can gain extra Fury, so we're basically never going to run out with this build. If you happen to feel like your resource is okay, you could, in theory, drop these two, because Harlequin Crest would give you this one, and then you can remove this, and you can get even more damage with Slaying Strike. And then I like running Warcry, and obviously the one that will give you extra damage here. And then we want to make the shouts last as long as possible. Extra regen is quite nice to get as well. I like to move fast. And then we don't use this anymore, the Charge Barb. This is a great thing for Charge Barb. But then we run this so we can get extra Fury generation while we are berserking, which is basically the whole time. We get extra damage over here. I really like running No Mercy. There's another great content creator, Rob. He actually opts to run Slaying Strike. Now, this is good if you do want to do pushing builds, and it's totally fine if you want to just run it anyways. But I personally prefer No Mercy, and what this allows you to do is it allows you to have extra crit strike chance against immobilized, stunned, or slowed enemies. But I want to give a shout out to Rob, because I want to say he's one of the originators of this build. But the thing is that I like to roll that chance for the slow, getting that chance to stun. And what that will allow you to do is basically gain an additional 9% critical strike chance, which is more important as far as like getting this build up and running. When your gear is absolutely perfect and you have that 100% crit in your build, if you reach that, then obviously you don't need this and you can put it in here. But realistically, for most people, it's going to be better to get instead of getting Slaying Strike, to get No Mercy earlier on. It's just going to give you more value. Obviously, against the boss, you're not going to have this, so this would be better against the boss. But once you stagger it, then you would then get this 9% additional crit. And then obviously, Pit Fighter is fantastic. We get Hamstring and then Cut to the Bone, because we are doing some bleed damage. If you can get Cut to the Bone, there's a few other things. Cut to the Bone, No Mercy, as well as Heavy Handed. All fantastic stuff over here. And then obviously Wrath of the Berserker, we're going to get the extra increased movement speed and Fury generation. That's how we, again, have no problems with the resource. And then we have the Supreme Wrath of Berserker, so every 50 Fury you spend, you get to get more damage. And then for the final one, we get Gushing Wounds. This is where we get big damage over here. This is what kind of deals most of the damage in the build, as well as the Berserk Ripping. And then as far as the Paragon Board, we are going to be starting off with Exploit. We want to reach this extra health over here, and then you get some damage, but we're really here just for the health. And then we grab all the nodes over here, the defensive ones. And then we are going to get Exploit, and this is going to be our source of vulnerability. I'll go ahead and maximize this because I know it's kind of hard to read sometimes. So we'll go ahead and do that. So we got Exploit on the first one, then we're going to be moving up to Carnage, and we're going to be running Might, and then we're going to make sure we get the bonuses with that. And then we run Blood Rage Martial over here, so when we kill a bleeding enemy, this is why you put the bleed on the Whirlwind, but you're going to want it anyways. You want to make sure that you get this maximum over here. There's a couple other things where you get damage while berserking. If you need those points, put them in, but you can temper and masterwork those things, as well as getting increased the Dust Devil size, as well as getting a transfer like more Dust Devils for the tempering. But yeah, you're going to be putting in all of the yellow ones over here. And then we are going to go from Blood Rage Martial to Bone Breaker and Wrath over here. We're going to be able to get that extra life. This is another like bonus life node over here. And then we are going to be going into Warbringer and Ire. So this is how we are actually getting fortification in the build, which is quite important. And then it doesn't really matter, by the way, the order in which you do this. And then we're going to be getting Hemorrhage. So our bleeding damage is increased by 15x of our vulnerable damage. So it doesn't matter, like I said, if you want to scale crit or vulnerable on your items, which one is the best, just get both of them, man. If you happen to get a greater affix and you're wondering which one should I put in, there comes to a point where you have so much crit damage that this actually becomes better. But there's other points. I'd honestly say if you have the option, I would just go with crit, because again, this is getting nerfed later down the line anyways, so you might as well prepare for that. But don't worry, the build is still going to be absolutely amazing. I mean, heck, Barber's getting even more buffs in the next upcoming season, which I'm very surprised about. But then Disembowel over here, so this is going to grant us extra damage. And then we have a couple options here. So you'll see that I don't have the nodes required for it. So right now, what I have in the gameplay is actually the Twister one. So if I go to, let me go to edit here and I'll show you guys a couple options that you guys can play, because I was running Twister and I didn't know that it was broken. In fact, I think this news just came out yesterday that is actually broken and not working. So you'd think, oh, we're playing a Dust Devil build. Why wouldn't you play Twister? If I put Twister in here, it's fine. Like, it works. So why are we not playing that? So there's a couple different options here. We can play Blood Feeder, which is 5% additional crit strike chance. There's also some additive damage, but that's like very small. It doesn't really matter. And there's also Disembowel. Disembowel will allow you to make it so if you kill a bleeding enemy, and remember, you're going to be dealing more bleed damage too, you get to reduce the cooldowns of your non-ultimate skills. I would actually recommend this one. Again, you'd have to tweak the points here, but the point is I'm trying to explain this to you guys. There is something broken with the node Twister with the glyph. I believe this is a video over here by Rob, the man himself, one of the top Barbarian players. He just uploaded this video. I'll link it down below. If this gets fixed, I'll try to remember to update it with you guys in like the description or something of the video. But he was just showing off that like this thing does not work. He was testing it out, and he shows in the gameplay here that this Twister node does not work. So basically, yeah, you don't want to play something that doesn't give you the damage, right? And this is a very common thing with Diablo 4, honestly. There's just so many like broken glyphs, this thing isn't working properly, and they are fixing these. So hopefully within the next week or two, this will be fixed, and the build will be even stronger. So even with the nerfs, guys, it's going to be absolutely just the same. Like, this build is going to be one of the top tier speed farming builds at the moment. Like, Bash was very, very good and easy to play, and if you have not tried out Bash Barbarian, my recommendation is to play the Bash Barbarian until you get these Uber Uniques. But if you don't happen to have them, like I said, you can play the Godslayer, you can play other things, but it's not going to be nearly as good. But that's going to go wrap up the build. If you guys have any questions or suggestions, let me know down below. But if you guys enjoyed the video and want to see an update to this build, if we need to update it, or any other Barbarian builds, because we're going to be trying out the brand new Deathblow Barbarian that will be available for Season 5, and we're going to be getting gameplay of the Season 5 next week. Anyways, take care. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out. And the build will be in the pinned as well as with all the timestamps.